Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 643 for the 7th of February, 2021. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia, where the birds are waking up. I don't know what that one is. Coming up on this week's show, not birds. Well, I don't know, maybe. Test your E.S.P. Yes, that old-fashioned term E.S.P. This comes from 1977 in the magazine The Australian Women's Weekly. From the middle of the 70s when E.S.P. was all the rage and Bigfoot and UFOs and all that sort of stuff. Test your E.S.P. This is a strange item where you give yourself a running total, a running score. Well, see how you go. Following that, it's more Logical Fallacies with the fabulous Michelle Bijkersma. This week, Michelle looks at the appeal to common sense, which is when somebody simply asserts their conclusion as being obvious and a fact. Then it's the welcome return of the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. Yes, Tim came over to the studios just the other day, sat down and recorded many weeks' worth of the Book of Tim. And it was quite something because normally the aircraft noise is very quiet now because of the downturn in flights and things like that. But for some reason, when Tim came over and sat down and started to record, suddenly we were getting all sorts of aircraft coming over. But nevertheless, we sort of recorded around the aircraft. And luckily also the people next door weren't renovating their kitchen anymore. The Book of Tim this week. Tim looks at magicians, ethics, names, laws, and more. Then to round off our continuing story into the unknown from the 1950s in our Trove section. And this week, the investigating panel, look at spirit healing. And what we discover over the next couple of weeks in this segment is that that fad from the 1980s, channeling, like Shirley MacLaine was into and so on, where people would put on funny voices and pretend to be ancient spirits. Well, I thought that was a new-ish sort of thing in the 80s, but we discover, oh no, that's been going on for a very long time. So, no matter where you are in the world, I hope you're enjoying a bit of downtime, being the weekend. If you're not listening to this on the weekend, then maybe you can find some downtime to relax anyway. And what better way to relax than listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast? But now it's time for me to run downstairs. Inspired by the Great Prediction Project, the Great Psychic Prediction Project I've been working on with a team now for some time, I think I might have a nice serve of waffles, because a lot of the predictions we're marking fall under the category of waffle. So some nice waffles with Canadian maple syrup. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now, some time ago, I ran a search in Trove, which we refer to frequently on the Skeptic Zone for the word psychic and things like that, and I discovered a page from the Australian Women's Weekly dated October the 19th, 1977. Ah, the 70s, what a wonderful time that was for UFOs, Bigfoots, Loch Ness Monster, and psychics. Of course, Uri Geller was still running around bending spoons. He still is. He still is running around bending spoons. Talk about a long career. And a lot was still unknown in the general public in 1977 about these issues. In fact, that's much the same today. Maybe we're living in a time warp. Anyway, I thought I'd read to you this page from 1977, and maybe you can see if you are a psychic. No, I'm not. Now, I don't see any bylines, so I guess this was by the editor or a staff writer or something like that. How do you rate your psychic abilities? Have you ever experienced astral travel, levitation, mental telepathy, or seen a ghost? Test your E.S.P, extrasensory perception, with these practical tests on telepathy and a quiz, both devised by Roma Warren of Sydney, principal of the Academy for Psychic and Creative Development. Don't worry if your score is low, however. According to Ms. Warren, scores above or consistently below average indicate E.S.P. And doesn't that cover most of us? For a practical test in image telepathy, Ms. Warren suggests getting together with another person to attempt to send and receive a simple message. These are most successful when the message is clearly visualized. So to start with, the usual parapsychology symbols of a square, a circle, a star, or waves. Once you have selected the symbol, stay with it. Practical telepathy can save on telephone bills. Right. Clearly image someone you know. Make certain their image is firmly in your mind. See them go to the phone and watch their hand dial your number. And I might say here that you might be waiting for some time. Now for the quiz. First, read the definitions carefully, then score 10 points for each phenomenon personally experienced, 12 points if it was spontaneous, without drugs or techniques. OOBE. The parapsychology term for out-of-body experience in which an individual becomes aware of observing his/her body with the same clarity as observing the body of another person. Astral projection, an awareness of actually leaving one's physical body. Add 10 additional points if you can do this any time at will. Astral travel, the experience of traveling through space without the physical body and not by thought projection. So-called flying dreams can be astral travel when they occur in colour. Right. For these, score 3. If you have been able to accurately describe events to a reliable witness, then subsequently received full verification of them, score 20. Astral body. The astral body is commonly regarded as the body in which the individual travels when not in the physical one. One can observe it without a mirror in the same way as one can observe most of one's own physical body. Adepts do not feel the need for a body. Score 10 points if you have observed your astral body. Score 20 points if you have witnessed its absence. Silver cord. It has long been believed that a silver cord runs from the physical body to the astral body until severed at the time of death. Like the astral body, the silver cord is created by anxious minds, and for them becomes a fact. The adept, who can enter or leave the physical body without feeling any need for connection, has no cord. Score 10 points if you have observed your own cord. Score 20 points if you have witnessed its absence. Levitation. Under certain circumstances, the physical body appears to become weightless and actually rises in the air, so no part of it touches any surface. This can occur by a few centimeters or more. Score 5 if you have experienced levitation. Score 10 if another individual witnessed the event. Add an extra 5 points if levitation was spontaneous. Astral lights. Astral lights are clear white lights which appear without any normal explanation. Score 5 points if you have seen these. Score 10 if others were present to verify their existence. Transforming yourself into pure light. Transfiguration. Score 5 points if you have seen yourself or someone else transfigured. Score 10 if anyone has witnessed your own transfiguration, transformation into light. Score 10 if you have seen yourself in the mirror or any individual not in a mirror disappear and transform into pure light. Visions. The visions can be in black and white or in color. It can appear like a picture on a small television or can fill the entire range of sight. It can appear in scenes, as a film does, or in continuity. Visions as a result of drugs, score 0. Score 10 for other visions. Score 20 if a vision was precognitive and told to another person before the actual event occurred. Energy. Energy varies from person to person and is subject to both use and abuse. It can be used for psychokinesis, bending or moving objects such as Uri Geller does. Non-conscious phenomena such as poltergeist, noisy ghost, activity, which most usually occurs through adolescence. Automatic writing, which can be operated by the subconscious, or healing. Score 0 for poltergeist activity. Score 5 for automatic writing or psychokinesis. Score 10 for successful magnetic healing. 15 for effective absent healing. Absent healing is the term used when the healer and the patient are separated by geographical distance. Mental telepathy. Score 10 for any simple thought transference result. Score 20 where a complex message has been successfully relayed. Dream recall. Many dreams are precognitive, premonitions of the future, and possibly explain some instances known as déjà vu, seen before, if a precognitive dream is forgotten when the real event happens. Score 5 if you have experienced déjà vu. Score 5 if you have experienced déjà vu. Couldn't resist that one. Score 10 if a dream recall has been subsequently confirmed by the facts. Score 5 if you have experienced déjà vu. Rebirth. Some people believe we live through many lives, known as reincarnation. Occasionally one can get through by personal vision, automatic writing, or by some other medium. Some insight which relates to one's self. If this happens to you personally, and not through another individual such as a clairvoyant, score 10. Aura. The aura, or energy field, can be photographed by the Kirlian method or seen by the naked eye. Score 5 each for seeing auras of people, animals, plants and trees, or coloured auras. Clairvoyance, seeing, clairaudience, hearing, clairsentience, sensing or feeling. These are all intrinsic parts of the increased awareness involved in E.S.P. Score 10 points each for the ability to see, hear, or sense a ghost, even if this has occurred only once. Scores. Few readers, if any, will attain a full score. In fact, many practicing clairvoyants are unlikely to achieve more than about half the total marks. So do not be disappointed if your score is low. The fact that you even attempted such a quiz is evidence of your interest in awareness. Nil score. Are you certain you're alive? 10 to 15. You probably have more problems than most people. Your preoccupation with these problems makes you inattentive, and this creates more problems. Work on expanding your awareness. 15 to 25. You are reasonably aware, but could be too materialistic in your outlook. 25 to 35. On the threshold of really discovering what life is about, a good score. 35 to 45. An intuitive human being. Trust your intuition and hunches. over 45. Yes, you are psychic. Use ESP, never abuse it, relax, and enjoy your gift. And that comes to us from the Australian Woman's Weekly, October the 19th, 1977, as retrieved through the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au. And maybe you have come to the conclusion, which I have after reading that page, that it was simply a page to fill out a page in a magazine of the time. It's just something the editors at the time thought readers would find interesting. I don't suspect for any moment they had any serious thoughts about it. No, but then again, at the time, there were a lot of people who were very interested in things like this. And again, the use of the term E.S.P, which you no longer hear. It's really gone out of fashion. And up until then, I think mystics and psychics and so on were sort of shrouded in a bit of mystery and a bit of showmanship. But then came along Uri Geller, who was just this everyday guy who seemed to be some innocent who somehow had these powers and wasn't really sure what was going on, but wasn't really playing the part of a showman. And that sort of translates a little bit in more recent decades to John Edward, who sort of comes across as this everyday guy who can talk to the dead. I mean, they don't come on stage with a cape and a wand or something like that, so it's part of the persona they project. Anyway, I wonder how you scored on that quiz. I think I'm hovering around the nil score myself. But if you did score over 45, well, you can send me a telepathic message about it.
The Earth is only 6,000 years old. That's what Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum say, and how can a museum be wrong?
Isn't Dr. Oz just wonderful? I loved today's episode. It didn't talk down to his adoring audience of women at all.
Science has proved that the subatomic quantum realm is as real as it is counterintuitive and bizarre. Therefore, I can use it to support quantum healing and quantum consciousness. After all, how can journals like Aquarius Metaphysics be wrong?
Evolution is just a theory. After all, if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys?
We all have friends and family who believe these things and much more. Well, if you're a rational thinker who is tired of arguing on social media and never getting anywhere, we have a solution for you.
Join the Guerrilla Skepticism and Wikipedia team, and we will teach you how to add reliable scientific and skeptical information to the world's #1 source of information, Wikipedia.
We write new articles and improve existing ones. We remove pseudoscience, paranormal, and alt-med claims, substituting the actual facts. And we operate in many languages.
We've already reached tens of millions of people searching for information, but as you can imagine, we can never do enough.
So please, join us. All you need is a PC and the desire to help educate the planet. In fact, you'll be educating the world while you sleep.
Contact us at gsowteam@gmail.com.
Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by PurplePlanet.com.
Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. this time we'll look at the appeal to common sense.
The appeal to common sense is a specific version of the alleged certainty. It occurs when somebody simply asserts their conclusion as an obvious fact. However, it may not necessarily be so.
When a person appeals to our common sense, they are making the assumption that it's knowledge we all share and can be taken for granted as correct due to our perceived universal human experience. However, there are times when we can be caught out, and what is really happening is that we are relying on intuition, folklore, or beliefs for which we have never truly examined the evidence.
I heard someone say they are not going to wait for a vaccine that might take years to develop. They're going to drink whiskey and might even investigate injecting a type of disinfectant if they think they may have come into contact with a person who has COVID-19. It's just common sense. You don't need to be a medical expert to know that alcohol kills viruses.
It's true that alcohol will kill viruses, and therefore it is safe to assume that using wipes or sprays with sufficient quantities of alcohol are going to be effective in killing pathogens in our homes. This is common knowledge, and correct hygiene practices have become common sense to a great extent. However, it does not follow that once ingested that the same will occur with disinfectants inside our bodies. Not only will it be ineffective, there is a risk of poisoning or even death depending on the substance.
If you really think about it, it kind of makes sense that some people think the Earth is flat and think that people on the bottom of the globe would simply fall off if it was a sphere. Have you ever tipped something upside down and seen what happens?
All of us have witnessed what happens when we tip something out and it appears to fall in a downwards direction. Most of us are also aware of the story of Isaac Newton and the apple falling from the tree and know that it's due to gravity. However, whilst we may think it is common sense that things fall downwards, gravity actually pulls us towards the centre of the globe, making it appear that the ground is at the bottom and the sky is at the top, wherever we may be standing.
My teacher friend asked her students to take a quiz to see what their preferred learning styles are. As they say in education, students learn best when teaching styles are matched to their learning styles.
It's highly intuitive to believe that students learn best when the way information is presented to them is in a form that suits the way they prefer to learn. For example, this assumes that the student who favours a visual style of learning will then perform best when information is presented in a visual format, such as pictures, graphs, video, etc. Apparently, 97% of educators believe this to be true, and it appears to be plain common sense. However, under scientific conditions, this has not proved to be correct. Research shows that around 70% of students do not choose to learn according to their preferences, but choose multiple styles of learning instead. Furthermore, they perform no better when given information in a way that matches their preferred learning styles than when that information is presented in another style. It has proven to be important that the focus should be on the quality and suitability of the delivery of the information, not on the learning style of the student. According to Voltaire, common sense is not so common. Although this is a slur, it is really quite a subjective form of knowledge. It can very much depend on our geography, culture, historicity, personal experiences, etc. As it is not derived from objective facts, As skeptics, it is important to keep this in mind and always seek the evidence rather than succumb to intellectual laziness and take common sense for granted, as it is not necessarily reliable and can't necessarily be asserted as factual. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michelle Bijkersma from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
Oh, hi, Maynard.
Oh, hi, Heidi. Great day in this park.
Yeah, if you like that sort of thing.
Look over there. A yowie.
There are no such things as yowies, silly.
Might be just a dog. A big dog. I think it's a King Charles Spaniel thing. No. It's a yowie.
Maynard, if it's a choice between it being a dog or a yowie...
No, it's a yowie. Yowie. Argument from authority. It's a yowie.
Hey, you two, what are you arguing about?
Maynard thinks that dog-looking thing over there is a yowie.
A yowie?
Or maybe Chewbacca the Wookiee?
I see. Okay, we better look this up in the Skeptics Dictionary online.
The what?
The Skeptics Dictionary online. It features definitions, arguments and essays on hundreds of strange beliefs, amusing descriptions and dangerous delusions. It also features dozens of entries on logical fallacies, cognitive biases, perception, science and philosophy. It's at www.skepdic.com.
Right, Heidi. Prepared to be amazed.
Okay, yowie. Here it is. It's under Bigfoot. It says... Most scientists discount the evidence of Bigfoot because the evidence supporting belief in the survival of a prehistoric biped ape-like creature of such dimensions is scant.
You know, maybe that is just Chewbacca after all.
Here, Chewie, come on. Here, Chewie.
Thank you, Skeptics Dictionary Online.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name's Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics and editor of our magazine, The Skeptic. Today I'm talking about the What Goes Around column, which is a regular feature of the magazine. And this one's from the December 2016 issue, which is volume 36, number 4, which you can look up on our website and download for free. This one covers magicians, ethics, names and laws, and follows on the principle that where you start, you can go around through a whole progress of connections and end up where you started from. So we're looking at magic, which is sometimes referred to as stage or street magic to distinguish it from paranormal or ritual magic. And this magic is one of the oldest performing arts in the world, in which audiences are entertained by staged tricks or illusions of seemingly impossible or supernatural feats using natural means. The term magic etymologically derives from the Greek word magia. Persian priests, called magos in Persian, came to be known as magoi in Greek. Ritual acts of Persian priests came to be known as magia, and then magica, which eventually came to mean any foreign, unorthodox or illegitimate ritual practice. The term magi in the Bible derives from the plural of the Latin magus, though in this case it refers presumably to their role in the Zoroastrian religion. The first book containing explanations of magic and magic tricks was The Discovery of Witchcraft by Reginald Scott. It appeared in 1584 and included a section devoted to debunking claims that magicians used supernatural methods, an early skeptic. Revealing how tricks are done, exposure, is considered unprofessional by magicians who believe that it ruins the experience of magical performances for audiences, not to mention the income of magicians. The joint bylaws of the International Brotherhood of Magicians, IBM, not to be confused with the company, and the Society of American Magicians, SAM, say that, with a few exceptions such as being an integral part of the Act, quote, members shall not reveal the modus operandi of magic effects or principles to the lay public. If you want to look it up, that's IBM Bylaws Code of Ethics, Section 10, Paragraph 1. The national president of the SAM from 1917 to 1926 was probably the most famous magician of all, Harry Houdini, who was born Eric Weiss, later Eric Weiss, there's a difference in spelling, or Harry Weiss, 1874 to 1926. So his period as president was towards the end of his life. He first attracted notice in vaudeville in the US and then as Harry Handcuff Houdini on a tour of Europe. As president of SAM, he was keen to uphold professional standards and expose fraudulent artists, particularly spiritualists, whom he targeted for much of his later life. He was also quick to sue anyone who imitated his escape stunts. In 1908, Houdini wrote a book titled The Unmasking of Robert Houdin, that's a hyphenated word, believing that the titular magician took undue credit for other magicians' innovations. This action might be surprising, seeing as Houdini actually adopted his stage name after having read and been impressed by the autobiography of the French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, 1805 to 1871. So Houdini took his name from Houdin. But Houdini later lost his youthful respect for the man widely considered the father of the modern style of conjuring. Robert Houdin's act included mind reading, levitation, and making objects disappear and reappear. His inventions were pirated by his trusted mechanic Legrand, who was arrested for making and selling duplicate illusions. He was a pioneer of performing in theatres and private parties as opposed to the previous practice, which was to perform in marketplaces and fairs. He retired in 1853. But in 1856, Robert Houdin was asked by Louis Napoleon to come out of retirement to pacify the tribes in French Algeria. During this period, the French army commanders maintained order in the newly conquered region. They supervised local Muslim administrations and the Bureau Arabe, the Office of Arabs, in areas which were closed to colonization by Europeans. Napoleon III was worried about a religious group called the Marabouts, who were able to control their tribe with their faux magical abilities. They advised their leaders to break ranks with the French, and Napoleon wanted Robert Houdin to show that French magic was stronger. Robert Houdin gave shows to theatre and select audiences, whereas his performances in Europe had been as much for fun as anything else. His performances in Algeria were given straight-faced. He was a pioneer in using the latest technology in his act. This included a, quote, light and heavy chest, using magnets to control whether a box could be lifted or not, allied to giving an electric shock if the subject tried to interfere with the trick. His mission was a success, and even though he later insisted to his Arab audience that he used magic tricks rather than sorcery, his accomplishments reminded us of science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke's third law, and his sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. which brings us back to where we started. Abracadabra. And that's The Cycle of Life, What Goes Around, from the Skeptic magazine, December 2016, volume 36, number 4. And as I said, you can look it up on the Skeptics website, skeptics.com.au, and download virtually every magazine in the whole 40 years history of the Skeptic for free.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
It's time once again to peer into the archives at Trove. At trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia. Now, over the past 5 weeks, we've been looking into the unknown, our continuing journey into testing or investigating into spiritualism by a panel way back in 1950 in the UK. Last week we had an Australian mystic examined by the panel. This week we continue with spirit healing. Into the Unknown, a frank report on the riddle of spiritualism, and this appeared in the Colour magazine Sunday Sun supplement on October the 1st, 1950. And as you remember, the panel have been investigating various spiritualists and seers and mystics over the weeks. Spirit healing. Healing of the sick by the laying on of hands or the making of psychic passes is not regarded by all psychic workers as a legitimate part of what can strictly be considered to be within the scope of spiritism. Yet there are spiritualists who aver that if only spirit healing could be positively probed and regulated, if only a healthy body could always be made to depend on a healthy spirit, then this single aspect of psychic activity might transcend all others in its usefulness to mankind. Mrs. Nan Mackenzie was seen at work by a medical subsection of the panel during one of her regular healing sessions at the Marylebone Spiritualist Association in Russell Square, London, WC2. When the doctors entered the room, Mrs. Mackenzie was working behind 2 large screens in the corner. Only a few of the lights were on. The healer was working on a woman patient who has a large growth in her throat. The guide was told that the doctors would like to see a demonstration of spirit healing, to which the guide replied that it would be really better to bring along people who had been healed at this centre and they could testify to their recovery. There would be standing proof. The guide, said to be male Red Indian named Running Water, continued, "I am working upon the nerves and muscles that comprise this part of the chest." And just an aside from me, we've noticed this before during these weeks of investigating into these reports. A few weeks ago we had somebody who was channeled by a spirit called White Feather, and this time we have Running Water. And I guess it reflects the sort of romantic notion people had and still do have about aspects of other cultures, in this case First Nations of the Americas. We read on. When the woman patient had been treated, the guide worked on Dr. Bendon's head and spine. The doctor was asked if he felt a soothing influence. Running water also worked on Mr. Ainsworth's head and back, and he said he could feel the warmth and it was very comforting. Running water said, "There are too many trappings," presumably clothes, "for the healing power to go through properly." The jacket and waistcoat were not removed. Dr. Bendon: "Do you work with your left or right hand, or doesn't it make any difference?" Running water: "Sometimes it is with the left hand, sometimes the right, sometimes both hands. Sometimes the left hand is as cold as ice and the other hand hot. It all depends on the patient's needs. There is not much to see in spirit healing, you know. It's either the talking away of the affected part or the flowing in of power, which, of course, you can't see." The guide was asked, what is the difference between what you do and what is known as vital magnetic healing? Guide: "This healing is for the heart and soul and the mind, as well as for the body. I don't know that there is much difference. I have never really studied vital magnetic healing." Dr. Bendon: "Do you find it easier to work through one who knows something about the body?" Guide: "Yes, it is easier." Dr. Bendon: "Do you ever work through a surgeon or any other person who doesn't realize it?" Guide: "Yes, often. I also help and inspire in his work a doctor in Wolverhampton who knows and appreciates the help he receives. I have given him many messages. I have helped him in many ways." Dr. Bendon's report: "My remarks about J.J. Thomas can be applied almost exactly to this lady. She has good hands for magnetic healing. Otherwise, her method is no different. The questions I asked were answered in the manner I expected them to be. It is worth noting that Mrs. Mackenzie was, I believe, a nurse or something of the sort." And now we have the panel looking at somebody named J.J. Thomas. A spirit healer who claims to have cured thousands of men and women in his public meetings throughout Britain and who toured Germany during the early part of 1950 is Mr. J.J. Thomas, whose spirit guide is said to be a German doctor known now simply as Dr. Robert. When Thomas was introduced to the circle, he was wearing a brown suit, grey and yellow check shirt, and a yellow tie, over which he had a white surgical coat. And as a aside from me, you can still see this sort of thing today, especially in, well, what I've seen in shopping centres, or you used to, where various people offer massages and they all seem to be wearing white lab coats for some reason or another. We read on. The seance room was equipped with a couch, towels, and a bowl of water, in which, from time to time, Thomas rinsed, apparently symbolic of a surgeon's washing up. After introductions had been made, Thomas stood at the back of the surgical couch, lowered his head in prayer, and apparently went into a trance at once, for the following brief prayer was said in guttural fashion, as though Dr. Robert had already taken control. O great eternal Spirit, we thy servants ask that we may have a manifestation of the healing power, and if it be thy will, these children may be restored back to health and strength once more. Good afternoon. Thomas, with eyes half closed, turned to his white-coated assistant. I will have the little man as my first patient. The patient, a Mr. Ingham, was led to the surgical table. I hope you are not nervous. You have quite a lot of courage to come and have all these people watch you. I am going to tell you every complaint I can find with you, every little condition. Just say yes or no, will you? Do you get a little pain there? Touching patient's heart. And spasmodic pain in the stomach? You get a little trouble in what you sit on too. Patient. Not a lot. Dr. Robert. There is a pain, a dull ache all the time. Touching the stomach, near the appendix. Patient. Yes, it's about 1,000 times worse than toothache. Dr. Robert. I am going to try to operate on you and get you back to normal health. There's a little throat condition, something of a headache, and a little trouble with the left eye. Also, you have hurt your leg in the past. Patient. That is perfectly right. Dr. Robert. You have a little spot here. Chest. And had an X-ray. I am going to do what none of your earth doctors would dare do. Making the motion of cutting across the lower part of the chest. This would destroy all the nerves. I think the earth doctors would agree with me. You get tired and listless. The legs get very shaky. I am going to open your stomach, then I will sew you up tighter than a Scotsman's purse, as you would say on earth. Oh, we like a joke. We have a sense of humor on the other side, you know. You have a pain behind the ear. You have had one tooth causing you a little trouble. Patient. That is right. The door opened and 2 more helpers came in. Rosemary, still in an outdoor coat, took her place at the foot of the healing couch, and George took his place at the head, both placed there by the white-coated assistant. After a few more pseudo-surgical hand movements by Thomas, the patient was asked to link up at the 10th hour. And finally the guide said, "Peace be in your heart. Get well, and thank God." The second patient, a Mr. Nicholson, was then assisted to the table and, answering a query from the spirit guide, said this also was his first experience of spirit healing. Dr. Robert. You also have a throat condition? Patient. That is perfectly correct. Dr. Robert. You have had trouble with your appendix? Patient. No. Dr. Robert. You have had a very heavy shock in your life. Have you been very near jumping out of your skin? Patient. Yes. Dr. Robert. It was during the conflict. You had what is called a very narrow squeak. You have come here with one thought in mind, to get well. You have had trouble with your left ankle, also up towards the knee? Patient. No. Dr. Robert. Has your wife got leg trouble? She has been going downhill too. Patient. Yes. Dr. Robert. She has a head condition, migraine. You are just wondering how I know. I have a colleague who has looked at the lady. I have the report back. The guide explained that Dr. Robert was a nom de plume. Spirit people come back with ordinary names because they like to impersonate a famous individual. No one on this earth could prove they were not that person. Dr. Robert said he has no turban, no halo or wings, and is never likely to have them. Then, turning again to the patient and still keeping in mind the diagnosed health condition of the patient's wife, he said, "Both of you will get well. You will get a little itchy feeling on the tongue, like a little quivering. I am going to put some healing into you. It will help more than you realize. You have had very bad bronchial trouble, verging on pleurisy." Still making cutting motions over the patient. "Do you find the top of the head muzzy? This condition is an aftermath of the chaos," implying the Second World War. "All your vitality went from you. You have had no real will since." Patient. That is right. Dr. Robert.
I'm going to operate on your solar plexus.
Suddenly, the medium looked up and said there was a lady among the watchers who had a corn or a hard callus. The guide told the members of the panel and their guests that already, before they came in, they had been vetted and they, in quotes, had had a look at them. And there we'll leave that part of the report for this week and continue with the panel's examination of Dr. Robert on next week's show. And that was Into the Unknown, our continuing reading of the report in the Colour magazine, Sunday Sun supplement, all the way back in October 1950. And it might interest you to know that in this part of the report we have more information about the investigating panel, the names I've been talking about for some weeks now. Sir John Anderson, former industrialist and graduate from Glasgow University, Sir John is also a philosopher, poet and essayist. He now devotes most of his life to research into unseen forces. Lady Anderson, who has psychic powers, attended most of the investigations. Lord Amwell began life as a newspaper boy and, in turn, became a shop assistant, parliamentary agent and political organiser before entering Parliament. He later became Under Secretary of State for Air and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aircraft Production. Lord Amwell is an active member of the Society for Psychical Research. Dr. Lawrence S. Bendant, former assistant physician at Tavistock Clinic, Dr. Bendant is a consulting psychiatrist. Dr. Bendant has written a book on psychism in conjunction with Mrs. Bendant. Mrs. Charlotte Haldane has made 50 reported experiments in clairvoyance and telepathy. Mrs. Haldane brought to the panel a viewpoint of a woman researcher who deeply appreciated the scientific approach to such an investigation. The Reverend Canon Knight, a Fellow of King's College London, he also studied at the Union Theological Seminary, New York. In 1944, he was appointed Canon of St. Paul's Cathedral. The panel extended its invitation to the canon because there were aspects of spiritism concerning Christianity which merited further investigation. L.A.G. Strong, novelist, essayist, and journalist, he is perhaps best known for his popular work in fiction and films. Strong is keenly interested in the supernatural, and this is frequently expressed in his writings. Leading British surgeons were also invited to assist in the investigations. So yes, join us here again next week for the continuing investigations of the panel with their examination of J.J. Thomas, otherwise known as Dr. Robert. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Coming up on next week's show, we continue into the unknown and our Dr. Robert, the German doctor, the mysterious disembodied spirit. More logical fallacies with Michelle Bijkersma, of course. And don't forget, if you go to the homepage on the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv, look down on the right side, you can find the link to Logical Fallacies with Michelle Bijkersma, the YouTube edition. Click there and you can see many logical fallacies on YouTube. Also next week, more Book of Tim. Thank you to those people who subscribe to the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv using Patreon or PayPal. And your generous support means the show keeps going. In fact, I have to pay some Skeptic Zone bills. And without your help, there would be no bill paying and no show. So thank you very much. And it's quite interesting because a lot of people subscribe with Patreon and subscribe in US dollars, which is fabulous. But as the Australian dollar gets stronger, the return to me gets a little less. So I sort of hope the Australian dollar goes down a bit. Nevertheless, it all works very well to keep the show going. Don't forget, as the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet reminds us, to check out live skeptical events. And I think in the next few days I'll be posting up on the Australian Skeptics YouTube channel the last Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, which was a fascinating talk. And we've also got the Vic Skeptics Cafe talks every month as well. But around the world you'll find many skeptical events online, and you can sit back, have a nice cup of coffee, and enjoy those from the comfort of your own home and interact. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who keep listening after the music, including that bird, the people who keep listening after the music is over. I think I'll open the window. You see, the birds get excited because the dice game is coming up. If you haven't heard this part of the show before, this is where I roll a die, usually a 10-sided one. Today it's a 6. And you use your... What's that bird? What? I think they want 3. You use your psychic powers to predict what number will come up. I'll roll the dice 3 times. Psychic powers? Psychic powers? I almost say that as if it's real. You just have a guess. Here we go. Roll number 1 in my dice rolling contraption. It's a 1. I'll write that down. Number 1. Next roll coming up out of 6 is a 6. 1, 6. And maybe Australian listeners can identify that bird. I'm not sure what that is. Last one. 3. 1, 6. And that's a very even spread, isn't it? And I'll use a D10 for this week's supplementary. So, last roll, and it's out of 10. Here we go. Another 3. This week's winning numbers are 1, 6, 3, and 3.